I'm going to have to break this exercise into multiple sections, most likely, because of the amount of time required to put this thing together. So if we were in the lab, we'd have the physical gear broke out. I scrolled down here and looked at the models. They were using a 4221 2960s. And then I took the diagram up above and I built out the packet tracer from scratch. So you guys are going to click on the network devices and the routers. I used a 4321, I believe, as it was the closest thing to what they had in the diagram. Let's double click and see. Somewhere up here it's going to show me the model. $4,300. So I'm pretty sure it was the 4321 that I used instead of the one that they had. And the interfaces match up. So something to note when I point at the router here. Come on. Is that these interfaces are the same. So I was using gigabit 001 and then F05 on the switch. Make sure that these ports, so this was supposed to be F06, just like in the lab. A lot of times I see people take the Ethernet card off the PC and then they plug it into like F02 or something. Well, that doesn't match what they wanted in the diagram. So make sure your port F018, F01, F01, F05, gig 001 all match up when you drop these cables in. So again, you just drag the router. We clicked on the piece, the switch device. You drag the switch, right? And then when you pull the cables, we go over here and we choose the straight through. Make sure that you're using F05 to gigabit 01 if that was what was required in the diagram. So once you get this thing built out the way that they have it in the lab, it's going to be a simple measure of going in and configuring. So we got to do sub interfaces on the router. We have to have a IP address on router 2. We got to have a loop back to pretend like we have internet out here. We got to have IP addresses on the networks. There's VLANs. So it shows the VLANs that are out there. We got to make sure that we build these things out correctly, and so that we have everything in the router. Make sure we have the VLANs named correctly. Make sure we have the right port assignments before you can even dive into the actual ACL sections. So what I would do is I'd go through here and take the basic stuff on the router and put it in a text file. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to do a notepad. And then so here it asks me to assign a name. So I'm going to do host name R1. I'm going to do a no IP domain lookup. I'm going to set class as the privileged password. So we're going to do enable secret class. Because it wants console to be Cisco password enabled. I'm going to do line console 0 password Cisco. And I'm doing indentation because I know I'm on the line prompt now. Enable it with login. And then exit brings me back to global. The next thing I want us to do is the telnet or SSH. In this case, we're using telnet. So 0 through 15 is typical. They want it to be password Cisco as well. So we're not requiring usernames and passwords. So that takes care of telnet or VTY. They want us to encrypt all the passwords on our piece of equipment. They want us to create a banner. We're going to go in here and go banner MOTD. You guys can come up with some delimiter. So until it sees a $sign, whatever we put in here is going to be a part of the banner. And then it wants us to save the configuration. So if I'm at global config, I'd have to exit, but instead of exiting, I'm going to use do. Because that goes in and lets us save the config. So once you build that text file, man, you have to have done this a bunch of times. So you guys, we're at semester 3. You guys should know all the commands. You should be able to build out a text file without having to go to the terminal window and issue those commands. So once we have that set up, change to selection, we should be able to click on our router. Pretty sure this was supposed to be R1 over here. I'll go back and double check in our diagram real quick. It is, and this is supposed to be router 2 out here. So I'm going to click on that router, go no. I'm going to do enable, configure terminal, and then we're going to paste it. You can see that we went through all those commands that they told us to do without typing them over there. And what that allowed me to do now is quickly build one for router 2. Because all we have to do is go to the text file, change this to a 2, and click no, enable, config, terminal, and paste. And now we have router 2 done. So you can see how much faster that is than having to sit here. So I'm going to build another text file for the switch, and then we'll add the other things as we go. So that took care of each router and what they wanted in step 2. So now you do the same thing for the switch. And actually, a lot of these commands are the same, so I can actually take what I've done for the routers and just rename them. And then we got to start creating VLANs. So these are switch adds. I'm going to take a break right now, and I'm going to let you guys walk through these sections so that you can refresh without me kind of doing it. And I'm going to build this behind the scene so I can get us into the meat and potatoes, which is down here in the actual enabling web services and putting in the access control lists. This is our main focus, is the access control list. Now remember, when you guys start the access control list and once we apply it to an interface, unless we've allowed it, it's going to be denied, because at the end of every access list by default in Cisco and most any firewall that we deal with, there's an implicit deny on the back end of our information or access control list. So if you don't want it failing, if we don't want it to not work, then we got to make sure we put a rule in there to allow it before we hit the end of our list. Remember, if you get a deny match early on in the list and there was a permit rule a little bit further down the list, but once you got a match, you know, if it's a fail match or a deny, we're never going to get to the permit. So if that permit needed to be successful, you'll have to move it up in the list so it got looked at first. Okay, so be careful where you place things in access control lists, because depending on where they're placed is going to determine whether or not this access control list works the way y'all want it.